Just a quick note before the video starts, Six Lick Productions is now on Patreon, so if you like the work I do and would like to help support it, click the link and become a patron today. Even $1 goes a long way to helping out. Now, on to the show. Okay, so there's a lot of information to go through here, and I'm going to get through as much as I possibly can in the next two videos, so bear with me. There are times where I'm going to lump arcs stitched across different episodes together, and sometimes I'm just going to bounce around wherever I need to. Volume 5 definitely tops the amount of stuff that's just plain wrong or bad in this show. And I thought Volume 4 was a mess. Volume 4's production was smooth sailing compared to this catastrophe. Now, to really get into why this volume fails on almost every conceivable level, let's start with the failed logic presented in the first episode, starting with 10 years and nobody bothers to go look for the Spring Maiden.
Now, I know you can't expect a kingdom under the siege of the Grim to be sending people out every 6 months or so to be looking for this one girl. I get that. But I think you can kind of make an exception in this case when the person in question is one of your fucking demigods.
Like, hello, one of the seasonal protectors, the key to the door guarding the world-ending artifact. Kind of a big deal. Look, Leo, I know you're a double agent, but you leaving the key to what Salem wants without knowing if she's even still alive or if the powers are even in the same host, it's kind of a stupid idea.
She was picked up by bandits, specifically the Brownwind tribe.
Raven.
Yang's mom?
Why does he know that? Why does he know that? Seriously, why the hell does he know that?
I know you people think I should be taking this stuff for granted, but if you just stop and think for 1 second, none of this makes any sense.
You're telling me that Yang told Jaune, a character that she has had all of maybe 3 on-screen conversations with in this entire show's run, about her mother, that they're close enough friends that she would divulge that. Sure, she'd tell Blake. Blake's her partner. She's someone she would have to be close with over a 4-year period. Who the fuck was Jaune in her life that she would feel comfortable around him to tell him that? And I know some people say that RWBY was the one who told him, but like, 1, how much would RWBY actually know about Raven? And 2, why would she tell Yang's story to them? Unless it was something he desperately needed to know going into Mistral, and I don't know how they would know to need that, and it just doesn't add up. Why does everyone suddenly know Yang's personal story? But was that actually a personal thing? Well, I think it was. I don't know. This show is so schizophrenic with its character interactions. I have no idea who is supposed to know what about who anymore. It just feels like cheating at narration when people suddenly know things that for all intents and purposes they should have no right knowing. Okay, so exactly how much information was on Ilya's phone? Because I was under the assumption from the end of last volume in the Blake short that they had everything. So what, they had all the information except Fennec and Corsair's name attached to it? Because that's convenient. I mean, look, they have information on some of the White Fang members, so unless the Blake short isn't canon, who am I kidding? Of course it's not canon. Nothing important is ever canon. Why do I even bother debating canon? But I need to pull aside here, because for as important as they made that phone seem at the end of last volume, none of it really seemed to matter in terms of Blake's overall arc. But I'll get more to that later. I can understand Yang's punch hitting hard due to the fact that it's metal, but how the fuck does it make him bounce around the room like flubber? But okay, that one's rather minor. Here's a question I have. Why was this scene the Volume 4 stinger? If this scene was meant to be in Volume 5 from the get-go, then it being the stinger was redundant and a waste of time. And if it wasn't meant to be in Volume 5, or it wasn't originally supposed to be the Volume 4 stinger, then that's just incredibly lazy and still a waste of time. Like, Volume 1 had a good stinger. Volume 2 also had a good stinger, it's just a shame it wasn't canon. Volume 3 had a weird stinger, but none of these stingers made a repeat appearance because we didn't need to see them again. Or apparently even acknowledge their existence again. Their presence and what they showed was enough, so why did this one have to be repeated? The Lancers are the only Grim introduced this volume. Not only that, but with the exception of the Scephozoa, it's the only Grim that even appears this volume. Unless you count the character shorts, in which case, sure, 1 whole extra. But the Grim are not even a factor in this volume. I mean, I know Volume 4 had some underwhelming Grim encounters, but they're barely even fucking mentioned all volume. Like, forgive me, but I thought the whole point of RWBY was that the people of the world live in complete fear of these essentially demons from another plane of existence. Like, why put on an assault of that size for one of the locations, but not another?
I mean, I get it. They pretty much spent the entire volume in the main city, but why didn't they just do to Haven what they did to Beacon?
Maybe the mountain fucks up that plan. Yeah, I'll roll with that. But anyway, this fight is way too slow. Like, I swear Weiss used to be a lot faster with her glyphs in this. And with that, this is the last time that Weiss fights without summoning for the entire volume. She's been in captivity for 6 to 8 months. Yeah, I know. Go fuck yourself. That's not how that works. Your body doesn't forget years of training with a weapon, even if it's been a while. It's muscle memory. It's like riding a fucking bike. Your body remembers the motions, and that also shouldn't affect how fast her glyphs go. And this is pretty much where Weiss's arc ends. We get some good scenes with her, but as far as having an actual story this volume, it just doesn't happen. Which is par for the course with Weiss. Her storyline's always getting cut in half. Seriously, I keep saying this. Weiss's storyline constantly gets fucked. Volume 2, she barely had one. Volume 3 introduced one in episode 4, didn't follow up with it until episode 11. And I already went into detail on her Volume 4 storyline. Like, they could have done something with this whole kidnapping arc. Anything, really. Anything to make it a personal journey for her, but all it was just a convenient excuse to get Yang and Weiss to meet back up. And granted, their reunion scene is both funny and pretty adorable, but still, my point stands. But really, I've just been complaining about the little things so far, or reiterating all points. The real issues with this volume start right here. Now, the biggest egregious offense in the handling of Sienna Khan... Yeah, you're right. The second biggest egregious offense in the handling of Sienna Khan is how easily disposable she was. Now, unless you're one of those fans who don't find this a problem, and in fact can conjure up reasons as to why the leader of the terrorist organization that has been hovering over this entire franchise wouldn't be an important character, people would generally expect Sienna Khan to be more of a big deal than she actually was. This is the woman who is the very reason why the White Fang turned violent. She is the reason for why the White Fang is now known as a terrorist organization. But actually, but actually, Blake said the new leader enforced the violent act. This was all her fault. She did this. No one else. I appreciate the fact that she now regrets her decision, but let's not erase what she did for the sake of Dude Bro Adam here.
Like, I get it, RWBY's cast is bloated, but this is really kind of their fault, isn't it? Because they wasted so much time on worthless characters early on. Now that it's time for characters of actual plot importance to start coming onto the scene, they get completely shafted. And they still want to bring in more!
We were going to introduce a character this volume, and this additional storyline this volume. Due to a number of reasons, we had to lose it. It's probably one of the hardest cuts we had to make. Just because we cut it from this volume, don't mean it's gonna be happening in another volume. Maybe one coming up soon.
Also, if she's the real leader of the White Fang, who's this? Yeah, remember this guy from Volume 1, Episode 16? See, when you set up a scene like this, it's usually meant as a foreshadow of a character's appearance in the future. That doesn't apply now, given that I'm pretty sure Cue Ball here doesn't actually exist. So, for future writers, don't set shit up if you're not going to use them. Also, there's something to be said about a black woman in a leadership position getting usurped and brutally murdered on screen by a whiny white boy 5 minutes after introduction, but, well, the scene kind of says all it needs to on that one. I've already discussed the major themes of the Orange and Oscar scenes for this volume, so I won't get into too much detail with this scene, but does anyone else feel like Ren is just reading from the manual in this scene? Like, I know there's no interesting way to deliver this exposition, but good lord, man, at least give an attempt to punch it up. And this scene here is just kind of insulting. RWBY essentially had to beg the audience to get us to believe that she and Pyrrha had any sort of meaningful relationship. Like, she literally looks like she's breaking the fourth wall half the time. But worse than that, it's trying to make us believe that this journey has impacted her in any meaningful way, which is their attempt to make up for RWBY's lack of character, and this isn't the way to do it, guys.
You can't just sum up volumes of no character development in one monologue that runs completely contrary to everything we've seen so far. You have to actually show characters developing, show how these events impact them, show how they learn and grow from them.
Now, Blake's scenes for the first half of this volume are really nothing substantial. Episode 3, she doesn't even have any lines, much less anything important to do. Kira's speech is good in that it sheds light on his time with the White Fang, even though apparently they took inspiration from an actual speech for this.
I remember one of the things we looked at for reference of this, of all things, Obama's speech declaring that Osama bin Laden had been killed.
So, thanks, Obama?
But the fact that this random girl holds more sway on the opinions of these people over the leader of Menagerie tells me a lot about the people of Menagerie. I'm just saying. I don't think there's any scene in any piece of media where going around gathering signatures is exciting or entertaining or even remotely watchable without wanting to fall asleep, and this scene is no exception. Also, for how much they keep saying Blake is the most mature member of the group, to hold the idea that a person can be summed up in a single trait feels awfully naive. Also, Fennec and Corsac played the message through twice for some reason. On to more worthwhile things to talk about. The Yang versus the Bandits fight is my favorite fight scene in this volume. It has the best choreography, and the flow reminds me of the good old days with Monty. And I know people disagree with that, and yes, there are plenty of flaws, chief of which, why didn't they just open fire, and how does this arm block all these bullets when the rest of her body is fully exposed? But this is the only fight scene in this volume that doesn't piss me off on some fundamental level, so for that I get a pass. Yang's logic makes no sense, because instead of just going to Haven to look for her sister, she does this incredibly roundabout way of locating RWBY. She's basing her plan on a lot of assumptions when the most logical thing to do was to go to Haven and ask around. Would it take longer? Sure. Would it make sense? Bet your ass. Because she's basing this on RWBY not being in Mistral after however long it's been, and that Crow has even found RWBY. It just seems like it would make more sense to go to Mistral, not track across Anima looking for bandits so they can get her to her sister. And did the end of V4 show her going off to Mistral anyway?
It's funny, at the end of Volume 4, people swear up and down that, you know, it's obvious that she goes one way or the other. We're trying to not do that, so,
See, an intentional bait and switch doesn't really work when you show her physically going the one way. But the real offense here is this encounter. Yang has been looking for her mother her entire life, and now she's finally face to face with her, and it's so fucking underwhelming that I am dying on the inside. Yang literally does not care in the slightest that the woman in front of her is the one she risked her life as a child trying to find. Like, what was the fucking point of the last 3 years of building this up if all we get is a fizzle? Which is a very common problem in Volume 5, but I'll get to that later. The issue I have with Raven's scene in Episode 6 is the same issue I have with the maiden spiel in Episode 8 last volume. While this is new information for Yang and Weiss, it's not new information for us. And again, there was a Cliff Notes way we could have done this. But this one's actually worse than the Episode 8 one, because unlike before when we at least got the lowdown on what the relics were and what Salem's goal was in regards to them, here we get nothing aside from that Raven is utterly incapable of giving a straight answer to anyone. No joke, the dialogue for Raven this volume is some of the worst writing in the entire series. It's like she's reading from the book of most cliched villains ever. Every direct question is countered and parried in an obvious attempt to keep the series from actually addressing anything worthwhile. The big secret here is that Salem exists, which, big surprise, we the audience found that out 2 volumes ago. Look, writers, I get that J.J. Abrams made a very successful TV show built off of having secrets, but they at least tried throughout the course of their run to answer the big mystery. I said tried, not always successfully. I meant, okay, you know what, fine, be that way. My point is, if you're going to insist on keeping the audience from the truth until you're ready to give it, you gotta give us something in return. You gotta give a little bit back. You don't have to reveal every single card in your deck, but give the audience something to keep them going. One good way to do this is to have them believe one certain specific thing is going to happen, and they have to race to prevent it from happening, and when the day comes for it to happen, it turns out not to be that thing, but something much, much worse. Like, instead of a portal that will unleash hundreds of thousands of Grimm, instead it's fucking Vecna descended from the ethereal plane itself to kill everyone. Make that even better as if even Salem and the other villains didn't know that was going to happen. And now they're at the mercy as well.
The best twist comes not from what the audience doesn't know, but from what subverts their expectations. A good writer knows how to manipulate the audience in a way that they'll lead them down one path, while keep the actual agenda perfectly hidden, and still be a surprise at the end. Or they'll completely fuck it up. That happens a lot too.
I know people who can come back from the dead.
Now if they don't do something with that line, then it's gonna be disappointing. Because it can't mean Ozpin. Ozpin never actually died. Death in his case implies his soul was destroyed, which it wasn't. And as we already discussed last video, it didn't reincarnate because that's not what reincarnation is. It just swapped hosts. Also, she says people in the plural tense, meaning more than one. So resurrection is implied to exist in some capacity in this show, and if that's not a clear case of foreshadowing, then that line shouldn't exist in any way, shape, or form if they're not going to deliver on it. Or hey, maybe this is just me wanting to show up all the people who thought I was stupid for thinking that Pyrrha and Penny were going to come back at some point. Take your pick. And at the end of this scene, we have essentially learned nothing except that Vernal has the stupidest weapon ever conceived by man. Seriously, I know this show excels off dumb weapons, but this takes the cake. If you fired this single-handed, the recoil would cause your wrist to snap in half. And we already find out later that she doesn't have an aura, so she doesn't even have that excuse. Like, what am I looking at here? It's Tyrion's pincer claws held vertically to shoot, where its gun is a sawed-off, double-barreled shotgun that shoots freaking laser beams, and they can be thrown around like chakrams. Like, who thought up this design, and why, and what were they on when they made it? This is one of the most impractical weapon designs I think I've ever seen. But regardless, this reunion scene is adorable. I mean, the hugs look really awkward, but it's a nice scene regardless. I personally was kind of hoping we wouldn't see Team RWBY reunite for a while, because in an ideal story, each character has to go through their own journey and their own path separate before they could come back together and really work as a team. But seeing as how they tried that and utterly failed at it, I guess we'll just have to cut our losses. Holy shit, signs of faunus discrimination! And that's the only bit of it we see, but hey, at least it's there! Still, for Mitchell being horribly racist, we don't really get to see much of that. Probably because we really don't interact with the general populace. At all.
The idea that Oz purposefully appointed a faunus to his school progressively move things forward with the kingdom. Like if we can get someone, not to say that Leo was just a diversity hire. When appointing Leo was like,
It was an intentional
awesome,
thing.
this is
Yeah.
great. Like, hopefully this will do something for faunus, the faunus
And,
image.
Why Ozpin is the one to appoint headmasters of the schools of different continents over the respective councils of each continent is utterly beyond me, because as we saw in Volume 2, even he is not immune to the council, even if we never saw the repercussions because of everything that happened afterwards. This episode, oh dear God, this episode. Oh dear God in heaven, this episode. I will never understand how someone who once upon a time wrote one of the best scenes of Red vs. Blue now can't write a simple hanging out scene without it feeling like all the characters have guns to their heads. This scene should be fun, but it isn't. The conversation feels stilted, like they're all just going through the motions of having a good time without actually, having a good time, like every high school reunion ever. It would have been cool if this scene had been a showcase of how friends see each other again after a long time, only to find that time and their experiences have changed them to the point that they have to struggle to find a common ground again, thus showing how age and trauma change us. But that's not what this scene was going for. This is a, hey, isn't it great that we're all back together again kind of deal. Which is fine, except it feels flat. Compared to the opening of Volume 2, which is full of fun and laughter and leads into the best food fight of all time, and now here we get this.
How do you lose your map at a time like that?
Oh, fuck you! And then to top it all off, we get this scene where they have to flat out say, hey, we've really grown as characters. Which, if you have to actually say that, then you really haven't grown. Either that, or you've done a terrible job as a writer showing their growth. Ren has two major scenes this volume, and both of them involve giving exposition dumps that feel like he's reading verbatim from the brochure. Like, I'm just baffled by how robotic all of this feels. Where's the passion? Where's the emotion?
You're up early.
Hey, sis.
Oh, it went into this episode. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, the interactions here between RWBY, Weiss, and Yang, and then later Weiss and Yang, feel much better than episode 7. Probably because it's a lot simpler. It's the one good slow moment because each volume seems to have at least one. Yang's frustration at her partner abandoning her was a conversation long overdue, and Weiss's reflection on how her family went downhill is some of the better character stuff this volume. It's just a nice little change of pace, and feels like someone actually tried here. And then on Blake's end of things, so this scene. I got into a lot of trouble over this scene, and I don't necessarily take back the things I said, although I'd alter them slightly just to try and appease everyone, which is an impossibility, I know. But that stuff aside, the only gripe with this scene is that Ilya comes off very Adamish towards the end of this encounter. Which again makes me wonder if Luna and Shawcross are just utterly incapable of writing a healthy romance.
Like, this really shouldn't be as big an issue as it is. Somewhere in the world there has to be a couple that actually communicates properly and is very loving and supportive of each other. I just want to see one. Is that so much to ask?
But Ilya honestly was the best character for me coming out of this volume, and I admit I only really appreciated it in hindsight. But she easily has the most interesting and complex backstory. She gives easily the best vocal performance of the volume. The fight with Ilya is one of the better fights, even with the stupid night vision bullshit. And she's voiced by one of the loves of my life. Sure, her storyline's not the best, or was written the best, but I certainly liked her better than most of the other characters this volume. Which leads us to the assault on the Belladonna's house. And some of this fight is really good, and some of this fight is really bad. There are some really creative stuff done with it, but there's also... Why? Just attack them, you idiots. Gamble Shroud's blade got smaller, for no discernible reason that I can figure out.
So out of curiosity, I wanted to know if it was actually possible to see a chameleon change colors in night vision. So I went to all the different search engines, I typed in every possible variation of the question that I could think of, and I couldn't find anything. I don't know if this experiment has just never been done before, or if the information is just not readily available, but I could not find a single thing about chameleons in night vision. So for this part, I kind of have to disregard that bit. Honestly, trying to find basic, general, easy to understand information about night vision in general is like trying to pull teeth from a raging crocodile, at least for me. If anybody out there has those answers, by all means share them with me, because I would honestly love to learn.
So the thing about this scene is that it's banking on Blake not being able to see Ilya in the dark because she herself is dark. Here's the thing about that. The human eye is naturally drawn towards movement. In night vision, against someone with camouflage, yeah, you won't be able to tell exactly who or what is out there, but you can still see something moving, you just don't have definition for it. But Ilya is as dark as the surroundings, you might say. Well, here's the problem with that. In night vision, light reflects off the walls, causing them to illuminate. That's why walls always seem to look brighter in night vision. In general, Blake's walls are white with some light brown, not nearly dark enough to not reflect some light. Ilya is pure black in this scene, not like the walls, but more like the darkness she's in. Tom, what's your point? My point is that Ilya's not blending in with the backdrop, she's blending in with the darkness itself, and against a lit up wall, she's going to stick out like a Yankee fan in Fenway Park. She's not cloaking into the surroundings, she's just adjusting herself to the darkness itself. Blake really should have had no problem seeing Ilya moving around there. And she certainly shouldn't have had to set her fucking house on fire in order to do it. I already said this was good, but like Yang and the Bandits, this fight bit really does remind me of the good old days when RWBY's fight choreography was still good. So, in the director's commentary, they acknowledge what Fennec and Korsak's role was originally going to be in Volume 1.
Originally in Volume 1, they were working with Roman Torchwick. The way the Grimm worked was super different.
Yeah, everything
in
was
that first draft. People would what was it? You could sell the liquid Grimm that you see at the top of Volume 4. Korsak and Fennec were trying to sabotage the Emerald Forest trials by buying some liquid Grimm off of Roman Torchwick.
Now, that actually sounds kind of cool. It would have upped the stakes during the Emerald Forest arc and actually give it some story purpose. Not only that, but it also would have tied into the Grimm Eclipse game in a way. So really, it's a shame they ended up cutting that, and not just because of all of that. Because for two characters that have been planned since the beginning of the show, Fennec and Korsak ultimately meant nothing to anything that happened in the series. They stood around for several episodes, and then they fought a little, and then we're done. Now one of them's dead, and the other's in prison, and it's like, wow, you could have done maybe a little bit more with them.
Humans didn't do this. We did this.
You did that, you dumb twat! I don't really need to tell you that the fauna suppression has been handled horribly at this stage of the game. Faunists are casually seen out and about society with no repercussions, and the White Fang are depicted merely as a radical terrorist group clearly on the side of evil. But this speech really kind of cements that they don't know what they're doing with this storyline.
I think the most important thing that Blake says during this is the people of Menagerie are looking for simple answers to complicated problems. I think this speech, this isn't just a simple problem. It's not. Years and years and years and years and years of so many different things, but the thing to focus on right now is beating the hell out of each other doesn't help, is something I genuinely believe. Yeah.
Except that's exactly what this is. They themselves are passing judgment on their entire race because of a certain few fucksticks with 400 pounds of C4 and a pissed off attitude. Blake's acting like if they don't defend Haven, then it's some kind of justification for the racism the Faunus face, and that's just not true in any sense. Menagerie doesn't owe Haven anything, really. I'm fine with the idea of them rallying to save people's lives. That's a noble undertaking in any capacity. But this is essentially guilt-tripping an entire populace to risk their lives for something that wouldn't absolve them one way or the other. This isn't going to magically make everything better, but it's being portrayed like it is. Not doing this lumps them in with the bad Faunus? Risk your lives in order to not give humans an excuse to be racist towards your kind? Fuck you.
And if that wasn't the writer's intention, then they shouldn't write scenes that could be so easily misinterpreted. Saying you're going to do better next volume doesn't really cut it when the audience has to deal with what you've given them for 9 months and how to let that sink in and take precedence.
Oh god, now we're bringing it back to this. This scene is cancer. The dialogue is so painfully cliche, and being performed by two of the worst voice actresses in the show doesn't help, but it's what they're talking about that really drives this home. And I'll get more into this later, but the idea of not just grabbing the relic and running when they can to instead stand their ground and fight RWBY's group is stupid. How is Dr. Chucklefuck the only guy whose sole concern is grabbing the relic and getting it to Salem, which you'd think would be plan A with a fucking bullet, and that plan gets shot down over the revenge plan instead?
Like, look, I appreciate villains that take the initiative instead of waiting for the heroes to come to them. But when you've already failed at getting one relic, and you're on thin ice with your boss, and you're kind of on the clock, sometimes the simple option is the best option, you know?
Watts was almost a problem here, because doesn't work on Watts. Watts is a really smart dude. Unfortunately, Watts is always a jerk to Cinder, and therefore, Cinder does not want to listen to Watts.
Guys, we've had it wrong all along. Jaune isn't Miles' self-insert. Cinder is.
And to end this video off, the only thing that actually pushes the main group to furthering the plot is a phone call by the villains in what is a very clear setup. Yeah. Also, this scene hurts my soul.
Well, I did have one more question.
No, my cane is not a relic.
I have no more questions.
One, because Ozpin has to flat out look at the audience and tell them his cane is not a relic. And two, because RWBY is a fucking idiot and doesn't bother to follow up with literally any other important topic. Like her fucking silver eyes. So by now, you're all probably fed up with how bad this volume has been. But in the third and final part, we're going to cover the final 4 episodes. So take this time between parts to grab a drink, go to the bathroom, and get some exercise in, because the worst of this volume is still yet to come. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to Patreon, follow my Twitter for more updates, check out all my other videos, including the Let's Play I've been working on. And I'm really not looking forward to next time.